Hello, and welcome back to the Agents Unleashed podcast, the show that helps you sort the signal from the noise in the fast-paced world of agentic AI. I'm your host, Thomas Maybrier, and I'm the digital media producer for Valerie, one of the core contributors to Olas. On this week's show, we're going to talk about something that's been years in the making, one of the most anticipated AI releases of all time from OpenAI, GPT-5, and also the open weight surprise that came alongside it. There's a lot to learn here about how the biggest players in the space are approaching AI, the decentralized contrasts that are also emerging, and what it can tell us about the potential future of autonomous AI agents. Before we start the show, I want to tell you a little bit about Olas and a little bit about Agents Unleashed. So Olas is the best way for anyone to own and monetize their AI agent. You can learn more about how to do that at olas.network, and Agents Unleashed isn't just a podcast, it's also the premier event series for people interested in agentic AI. Events have been held all over the world with thousands of in-person attendees and more than 100 different speakers and presenters. You can watch replays of their talks and presentations at olas.network/agents-unleashed. This episode is sponsored by Sigil. Sigil is one of the top performing regulated crypto hedge funds worldwide. It's been run by crypto natives since 2018. You can learn more at www.sigilfund.com. So when people talk about the tipping point of the recent AI boom, they would usually point to ChatGPT's public release at the end of 2022. But honestly, the real shift happened a few months later when GPT-4 came out. That was the moment that an impressive but sometimes uneven tool turned into something that you could really rely on. Additionally, the speed of progress between 3.5 Turbo, which was in the original ChatGPT release, and 4.0 made it feel like GPT-5 was going to be right around the corner. Well, it turns out that right around the corner meant summer of 2025, so more than 2 years. In that time, we've had competitors flood the market, Sam Altman get ousted from his own company and then make a return. The AI race has gone fully global, with China emerging as a heavyweight rival, and the alignment debate has shrunk into an oddly political corner that we don't always hear very much about. ChatGPT also now has 500 million regular users, and all this happened before we got GPT-5. The road here was definitely messy. OpenAI spent much of 2024 working on a model that was called Orion, which is supposed to be GPT-5. It fell short, was rebranded as GPT 4.5, which kind of faded into the background. You could switch it on in certain plans. I actually really liked it, but the usage caps and the cost associated with running it meant that I couldn't actually use it very much, and I think for a lot of people, based on the chatter online, they never really used it at all. Then came the pivot to reasoning models, which also somewhat stumbled. While O3 could do a lot of great things, it definitely wasn't the massive unlock that OpenAI's marketing often gestures at when they talk about what new models will and should be able to do. But now GPT-5 is here, but the early reactions are definitely mixed, I would say. Some influencers who got early access were particularly breathless in their posts about what they thought the model could do, and many of them were particularly impressed with its abilities around coding. Another common thread in positive reviews was that people felt that GPT-5 was more steerable, and that's something that I've found to be true in my testing as well. Casual ChatGPT users, however, may be less impressed. The main changes for them, I think, will be the cleaner interface and maybe the new switchable personality modes. The context window is also much larger, and OpenAI has made some interesting changes in how the model routes queries, sometimes even switching you to smaller mini versions of the model once your quota for the larger model has been used up. We'll talk more about how they handle different models a little bit later in the show. So on Wednesday, Sam Altman announced some changes to how users could select the flavor of model that they use, and also some additional changes to which models were available. And again, as I said, we'll return to this idea a little bit later. If you're coding or running GPT-5 in an enterprise environment, I think that the performance upgrades will be more noticeable, and that's definitely deliberate. Coding is where the AI industry's attention is at right now, and OpenAI's launch pitch leaned heavily on its programming performance, and the pricing seems aimed directly at undercutting their main rival, Google. Coding could be a sweet spot for large language models. You've got measurable progress, a clear market, and a plausible path towards self-improving AI. Additionally, companies are very eager to use models in this way. Microsoft, Shopify, Duolingo, just to name a few, have mandated that their employees, including developers, find ways to use AI in their work. At Microsoft, your use of AI is even factored into your performance reviews. But here's what's interesting about the release. GPT-5 isn't exactly blowing people away. In 2023, people assumed that 5 would set a new standard, and even that it could be AGI. Instead, intense competition and some creative scaling methods mean that Google, Anthropic, and others are right there or right behind in the same performance tier. Online betting markets like Polymarket even think that Google might retake the lead for best AI model within a couple of weeks. One thing that could shake up the balance is pricing. GPT-5 is free for basic use, and it's cheaper than many of its rivals for things like enterprise use or coding. If this turns into a price war, it could get pretty brutal because all of these companies are spending much more than they're making right now. One of the more surprising side stories from the GPT-5 launch has been the reaction to the loss of its predecessor models, and one of them in particular, 4o. When 5 first came out, older models were deprecated, and users were really not happy about this. In a Reddit AMA hosted by Sam Altman, requests to bring back 4o were voted up to the top, and relatively shortly thereafter, access to 4o was restored for paid users. The company has also said that if and when they do remove access to 4o, that they will provide users with a warning. However, it will eventually go away, highlighting the difference between a centralized approach to AI and a decentralized one where ownership can be shared and actually given to the end user. 4o may be back for now, but the value that it creates for users, particularly for those relying on it for AI companionship, exists without any ownership. When it goes away, these users will be forced to adapt. For some, that's a very big problem, and it's an interesting conundrum for the company, especially since the sycophantic features that OpenAI ran into some trouble with a few months ago, you could see episode 3 for more about that, seem to be part of what makes 4o so engaging, so compelling for these users that demanded its return. By contrast, GPT-5 is less personable, less agreeable, less chatty than earlier models, and particularly 4o. These are definitely trade-offs that they're making, and it will be interesting to see how they manage this push and pull going forward. Before we move on here, I would say you might not miss 4o yourself, but remember that any centralized offering is always conditional, and that those conditions can change at any moment. And that's really the deeper issue here. When we talk about owning your AI agent here on Agents Unleashed, this isn't just a philosophical point. What we're talking about is your ability to control, take with you, understand, and modify a tool that presumably, hopefully, does useful things for you. If your work, your business, or your creative process depends on an AI or an agent created within the system where you don't have ownership, you're always going to be exposed to the whims of the corporate product cycle. This is just one of the reasons that open source and decentralized ownership really matters, and why at Olas we focus on agents that you can download, run locally, and keep. No one can take them away from you. Today's show is sponsored by Sigil Fund, a top-performing regulated crypto hedge fund. Since 2018, Sigil has been delivering above-average performance via smart exposure to crypto markets. Now, after 4 years of private testing, they're opening up a new strategy to qualified investors, Sigil Stable. Sigil Stable focuses on yield farming and market-neutral strategy, providing returns uncorrelated with market prices, taking away the stress of crypto volatility. All of this comes with daily NAV reporting for investors and no lockup on the investment. Learn more at www.sigilfund.com. All right, back to the show. Staying with the theme of openness, I want to transition to the other big surprise that OpenAI dropped, the announcement that they've done something that they haven't done in 6 years, which is to release open weight models, actually 2 of them. The last time OpenAI put out an open weight model was GPT-2 in 2019, but now we have 2 of them, GPT-OS 120B and 20B, so 120 billion parameters and 20 billion parameters. Now, the 120 billion parameter model is aimed at pretty serious hardware. This is something that you would run in a data center, but the 20 billion parameter model could be run on most decent laptops with 16 gigabytes of RAM or so, or even some of the more powerful phones out there, but probably a little bit slowly. Both of these models use a mixture of experts architecture. They've got chain of thought reasoning, tool calling, and pretty big context windows, up to about 131,000 tokens. Performance-wise, 120B is in the same league as OpenAI's own O4 mini model for reasoning, coding, math, and health benchmarks. The 20B version is closer to O3 mini, but still overperforms in certain areas like health and math. This is a pretty big deal, and here's why. Well, because these models are open weight, you could download them, run them locally, fine-tune them, or even deploy them privately. That could be huge for a variety of different use cases, particularly locally run AI applications, agents, that sort of thing. And we're already seeing these models show up in platforms like Databricks for secure governed deployments. Now, it is worth saying that open weight isn't the same thing as open source. GPT-OSS gives you the train parameters, or the weights, So you can run them locally, fine-tune them, deploy them privately, but the full training data, the pre-training code, and the recipes about how the model was produced are still closed. That's not unusual. This is the same way that Meta's Llama models are released, but it's important to be clear-eyed about what we're getting here. This could be so-called portable intelligence, but it's not transparent intelligence. By way of analogy, this would be like a car that you could drive, you could repaint, upgrade the stereo, but you're not going to be getting the blueprints for how the engine was built. It's encouraging to see OpenAI returning to the open that's right there in their name with this release. And I'm definitely going to be looking forward to see how developers, in particular agent developers, choose to use these new models and what they figure out you can do with them. While we're talking open weight, it's worth mentioning Sentient, one of the teams who are pushing this idea even further. They don't just release models that you can download, but they're actually experimenting with decentralized model hosting. So the weights themselves live on a peer-to-peer network. So there's no single company server where they live. There's no kill switch. And you'll never get an email letting you know that the model that you've come to rely on has been deprecated. It's definitely early days for all of this, but it's great to see more decentralized and open alternatives emerging in the space, giving us examples of how potentially open weight could evolve into a truly unstoppable distributed kind of intelligence. Exactly the kind of direction we need to go if we want the AI of the future to be resilient, auditable, and actually owned by its users. Wrapping up here, I would say that right now it seems like the AI race is being framed around who can build the best, fastest, but the long game is going to be about who controls the models, who controls the agents built on them. Will they live in someone's cloud? Will they live with you? Will they be portable? Will you have access to their weights, their intelligence, the value that they generate for you? The GPT-4o saga in particular is a reminder that anything that you don't have ownership over is a rental, and that contract can be terminated at any time. As a contrast, when the agent is yours, the weights, the logic, all of it, it's not going anywhere unless you say so. All right, that's all I have for you on this week's episode of the show. Before we go, I'd like to ask you for your support to grow the show. You can do that in two simple ways. One is leave a comment, a reply, a recommendation, a rating, share the show with your friend, family, coworker, and then the second is to take the user survey that I'm currently running. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be collecting your opinions about the show, and one lucky winner could win a prize of 500 Olas tokens. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes, which you can find on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, or the podcast platform of your choice. All right, we'll leave it here. This has been the Agents Unleashed podcast. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.